Hello there. I'd like to talk to you today about the subject of the blood feud and the blood feud tradition. In East Timor, in my province, which was a very traditional area, the blood feud tradition was alive and well and was very difficult to deal with. When you had an incident, the village knew exactly what had happened and who had done what, and they would classify people into three different sorts. People with clean hands, they hadn't done anything, they were a witness, they were whatever. People with dirty hands, they'd stolen something, broken something, aided and abetted some kind of crime, or people with bloody hands. And people with bloody hands were the subject to the blood feud and the blood feud tradition. Now, villages were like this all over my province. They had traditional thatched houses. One or two houses might have a corrugated iron roof, but it wasn't that common. Very, very poor province. And basically what happened the night of my incident was the worst timing that you could imagine. In 48 hours I was due to take my only spot of leave that I took in my time there as the governor. I was going for 2 weeks back to Sarajevo, a very difficult journey, and getting married. So I was kind of keen to go, and there was somebody at the other end who was really quite keen for me to arrive. So 48 hours before we're going, it's just before dusk, the day's work is over. I'm listening to the chatter on the radio in the background, and I hear that the UN civil police are rushing a guy who's been in a very bad accident to the village hospital, and I hear the word stabbing. It's sometimes difficult to get everything on the radio. I realize that this is a major incident, so I jump in my car and I head for the village hospital. I get there just after the police have arrived, and the victim has been taken into the little hospital. Also monitoring the radio was the local comm center of the battalion that were the international battalion that were in the province, and they had on their own initiative sent their surgeon and his surgical team to the hospital to give assistance. Just as well they did, because we had other doctors, but we had no surgeons in the civil side of the thing. So anyway, this guy was taken inside. He was being looked at by the Jordanian surgeon. Oh, and by the way, the surgeon only had local anesthetic to deal with this situation. And the police started to fill me in on what had happened. And what had happened was, out at the village where the victim had come from, three guys who were involved in a blood feud with his family had come round from another village on the other side of the mountain and had been standing outside his hut in the village and shouting at him to come out. They were taunting him. And so he finally came out and he shouted at them, they shouted at him. And then he said, "Oh, you're very brave with three of you. Let's see how brave you are." And he went back into his hut and he came out with a little ceremonial sword. This isn't the one, but it was very like this one. And he waved the sword around in front of them, said, "Yeah, who's brave now?" And of course, the guys were taken aback because they had not come with any weapons. They had just come with insults. So one of the three grabs a piece of firewood and whacks the arm of the guy who's got the sword, and they get into a close quarters clinch. And just like the movies, when there's two guys wrestling over a gun and there's a shot, and one guy has the face that says, "I've just been shot," there's one of the guys who's wrestling in the clinch has got the sword through his soft part of his belly, his intestine, just so the point is just coming out his back. Serious stab wound. And of course, it's the guy that has gone and got the sword. It's the owner of the sword who's got his own sword through his middle. So the police, UN Civpol, were there very quickly. They got the three men who'd gone to the village because, of course, the 40 or 50 onlookers who'd gathered to watch the fight surrounded the three, and the three had to stand very still till the police arrived. those three are gathered up, and the victim is slowly being patched up by the surgeon. The guys made a joke later, not at the time, but later, that he went into the hospital a colon and he came out a semicolon, because the surgeon had to take out a great deal of his intestine and sew them back up again, the two sides that were good. But the surgeon got him stabilized, and it's after dusk now. But he comes to see me and he says, "Sir, I've done what I can. He is stabilized temporarily, but we have got to get him to the proper hospital in Delhi tonight." And I just sank, because we had no way of getting him to the hospital that night unless I called for a helicopter air ambulance, which for other reasons at other times I had frequently not done. Anyway, realizing that this was a blood feud and that the pressure was on me, I called in, and of course the military were fantastic in this situation. They said, "You'll have a helicopter, within 45 minutes to an hour latest at your location to pick up this guy." And so I said to my people, "They're going to send a helicopter. We've got to get our little dirt strip ready to receive the helicopter." And this is a photo from the dirt strip. This was not the reception committee for the helicopter. This was a reception committee for Mr. Ramos Horta, who shared the Nobel Prize with Bishop Bello, Nobel Peace Prize with Bishop Bello. So he's a pretty important guy. He's East Timorese. And these young ladies were being drilled by their mother to perform a ceremonial dance of welcome for Ramos Horta the day after. And so we drove down to the little dirt strip, which is exactly where the girls here are dancing, practicing. And I said, "Right, we've got to get these empty old bean cans and tin cans, half fill them with sand, put a big glug of diesel fuel into the sand. And when we hear that the helicopter's 5 minutes out, we light them, and the circle's got to be very large. You've got to have complete safety landing in the circle." And my guys ran around it. Like everything, when you have a real emergency, people just do it, and they get on with it, and they really were excellent. Except when I came back, there was the circle of tin cans waiting to be lit up, and right in the middle of the bullseye, there's another tin can. And I said to the guy who I'd put in charge, "And what's that for?" And he said, "Well, the pilot's got to have something to aim at in the middle." And so I thought we'd put a can in the middle. I said, "So we're going to invite a helicopter filled with its own fuel to land on top of an open flame? Possibly not." So anyway, rather sheepishly, he took that can away and put it into the outer circle. Along comes a helicopter driven by a typical, 26-year-old cowboy. Loved it. Landing at night inside these flickering circle of lights. The guys rush out with the victim who's been lashed into a stretcher. One of the Jordanian male nurses jumps in with him. Off goes the helicopter, 2 minutes max. And so we now go to do the sort of post-action bits and pieces. So I've got 3 guys that the Civpol have rounded up, the perpetrator plus his 2 mates, and they are being held by Civpol. We have no jail. We've nowhere to put them. And I can't let them go out, because that will be an incitement to the blood feud to continue. So I get the colonel of the battalion. I say, "Colonel, I know you've got a little stockade. I'd like you to lock these 3 up for the night. The perpetrator will be locked up until I get back from my leave in 2 weeks. The other 2 can be let out in 24 hours when my guys have had a chance to calm the villages." And the colonel says, "Love to, but I don't have authority to lock up civilians. This stockade is for me to lock up any of my soldiers who misbehave." I said, "No problem." So I got my notepad like this. I ripped a sheet out of it, and in pencil I wrote, "Jordanian Battalion Colonel Al is required to give aid to the civil power and lock up 3 people against whom a prima facie case exists, and they are to keep the perpetrator locked up until my return, blah, 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 signed, Governor." And with his ripped old piece of paper written in pencil, the colonel said, "No problem, we do it." And off he went and he organized it, and the guys went into the slammer. The point here is that we have to improvise where we have to improvise, and you always have to keep the operational situation in mind. What is the one thing I must do? And then after that, if there's other bits that are nice to do, that's good too. And the one thing I had to do was keep the blood feud contained. So the bottom line, I come back in 2 weeks. It's still going to be another 2 weeks that the guy's going to be in Dili in hospital. There was some blood poisoning issues, but he's going to survive. And so I go back to my province and I tell everybody, on the day that the victim arrives back in town, we will let the perpetrator out of jail as well. But before then, every day, Civpol are to visit both villages, where the one village of the perpetrators and one village of the victim, and they're to go around, starting with the elders, and they're to explain to everybody that if there's any more of this, I will have to go to Dili and collect some gendarmes and come and burn houses in the villages. I will burn houses to the ground of people who keep this thing going. And they've got to believe it. They've got to really, really believe it. And that is why I didn't go myself. I did send for some of the elders and see them in my office. But I let the policeman go round the village and say, you don't want to annoy this guy. He's really mad. Don't push him. And we got away with it. What actually I would have done had the blood feud erupted again, I've no idea. I've no idea. It was pure flying by the seat of my pants. Blood feud, very difficult to deal with. Very difficult to deal with. So, really that's all I have to say about my experience with the blood feud. Thank you.